Do you know Vem Miller? Do you know who he is? Well, if you don't, you should have been watching The Truth with John Gordon, because he was our guest on September the 29th. We interviewed him at the suggestion of his publicist. He came on and was with us for almost an hour. We talked about the history of the deep state and their bad deeds. We talked about Donald Trump, JFK, RFK. We had a wide-ranging conversation, and I actually enjoyed the time that I spent with him. Now, if the name is familiar to you, but you can't really remember from where or why, you may be thinking about the Vem Miller who has been in the news as an alleged attempted assassin against Donald J. Trump. Trump had a rally in California. Vem Miller was in attendance. According to the sheriff, he was beyond sketchy. Here's what the sheriff had to say.
So that outside perimeter are I will give you his name. The name that we have, and I'm going to put an asterisk by it as I explain this later, but we have his name as Vem, V-E-M, Miller, M-I-L-L-E-R, and his birth date is 10/26 of 1974. And the reason why I gave it to you like that is I will explain later. He approached the outside perimeter, gave all indications that he belonged there, that he was a participant that was allowed to get into VIP and a press corps, and so he was allowed through that outer perimeter. As he got to the inside perimeter, where deputies were conducting obviously a more thorough evaluation of the vehicles that were coming in, there were many irregularities that popped up. The deputy noticed that the interior of the vehicle was in quite disarray. The vehicle had an obviously fake license plate, and that prompted further investigation from our deputy into why the person was there and what he was doing. During that investigation, the deputy eventually found multiple passports with multiple names, multiple driver's license with different names. The vehicle was unregistered, and the license plate was what we in law enforcement would recognize as one that is homemade and indicative of a group of individuals that claim to be sovereign citizens. And assuming the deputy assumes that he was part of that identifying group. So during the investigation, obviously those identification documents were found, in addition to a loaded handgun and a shotgun. Obviously, this was before the former president arrived. The person was taken into custody. He was eventually booked into jail on those charges, and eventually he was released. He will have to further his court case is in the future.
So the evidence against Vem Miller is that he looked and acted sketchy. Now, I will concede that, I only have one driver's license, and it's only in my name. To have multiple licenses, driver's licenses, and multiple names is really, it's beyond sketchy. I'm sure it is also very illegal. The sheriff also alleged that was Sheriff Chad Bianco, by the way, of Riverside County, California. Sheriff Bianco also alleged that Vem Miller had multiple passports in different persons' names. So I don't have any questions at all about why they stopped him and detained him and had a closer look. Having a car that is in disarray and a homemade license plate is not on its face grounds for probable cause, I don't believe, to search a car. I think they would require a warrant to do that. It may be borderline, and particularly given where this occurred, a court probably would side with the police officer on that. On any other occasion, I don't think that those would give rise to a probable cause search, but nevertheless, they did. And when they searched the car, they found a pistol and a shotgun. Now look, there is nobody on this planet who is more loyal and more concerned about President Trump's safety than I am. I have been very vocal about the lapses of the Secret Service and the investigation, quote, investigation by the FBI, the lack of transparency, the lack of common sense answers surrounding Butler and West Palm Beach. I have been to the site of the West Palm Beach Trump International Golf Course where the attempted assassination took place. My producer and I have actually spent hours there trying to see what we could infer or glean from visiting the site. My conclusion is that the omission of protecting that perimeter, if it wasn't an intentional omission, I don't know what it would have been. I'm not in law enforcement. I'm not in the business of securing valuable assets, but I do have a brain and two eyes and common sense. And when I look at that perimeter, you can see all the way down Congress on one side and all the way down Summit on the other. It would have taken 3 people to have secured that perimeter. 3 people with binoculars that would be looking at one another and anything that moved in between on those 2 sides. The rest of the golf course is surrounded by the Palm Beach County Jail and Sheriff's Office to the north, and then a lagoon, and then heavily wooded areas. And I don't know that it you could get close enough on the west side to be a threat to someone. So I've been very vocal that I think that was the height of irresponsibility and possibly worse. All right, now, Vem Miller. I've spent an hour with him on Zoom for the interview that we conducted 2 weeks ago. I found him to be a very intelligent, forthright individual. And I just want to, if you didn't see the interview, here we've got a few clips. Let's roll clip 1.
Start to see the distinction there between Republican Democrats and realizing that it's just wings of the same corrupt bird. And really the outlier here is Donald Trump, and hence why we seem to be leaning more towards him to be president.
And then we continue the interview, and here's another clip.
Had people calling me a white supremacist and all kinds of names, but you just stop caring after a while, you know what I mean? And I think that, you know, when we're talking about castrating children, when we're talking about giving jabs that kill people, I mean, it just, at a point, it becomes like, which side are you on? We're going to be part of that evil, and that's just something that I was not cool with, and I decided, you know what, I'd rather sacrifice my 6-figure Hollywood career and retain my soul as opposed to be part of this evil propaganda machine. This is what they're so scared of Donald Trump, because you have a contrast there. You have this weak, frail male, which, by the way, the third wave feminists love because he's a complete tool, and I'm referring to Biden, like literally a puppet, hand puppet for them, for the third wave feminists. And then you have Donald Trump that couldn't give a rat's ass about that sort of thing. That is the biggest threat to them, because if this man wins, it's about his aura, his personality. Now you have generations of men wanting to be Trump-like. What does that do to the deep state? You know, so that's what they're scared of, because they want the image of America's leader to be feeble, to be a pushover. And that's what they love. That's what they love so much about Biden and the other hand puppet, you know, Kamala, another hand puppet, you know, Biden. And frankly, I think George W. Bush was another hand puppet. So, yeah, and Bill Clinton as well. And George H.W. Bush. I think the last not hand puppet president we had was Ronald Reagan prior to Trump.
Okay, so I ask you to tell me, what do you think? Does this sound like someone that's deranged, that hates Trump, that would want to eliminate him? It certainly does not to me. And I don't know what happened in Riverside County, California on Saturday, other than that he was stopped and detained because he had a messy car. And I guess that the homemade license plate would give cause for concern. But then the search led to discovering a shotgun and a pistol. But there's no allegation, there's no reason to believe that he was going to carry those weapons into the venue. I mean, how are you going to conceal a shotgun, for God's sakes? You're going to stick it under your arm? I mean, he's a tall guy with long arms, but how are you going to conceal that? And you know he's going to have to go through the magnetometer. He's been to a lot of rallies, a lot of political events. He's no idiot. And how would one expect him to get through the magnetometer carrying a pistol and a shotgun? Yet Sheriff Bianco comes out and says that he and his men stopped the third assassination attempt on Donald Trump. So the long and the short of it, as I said, there's nobody in America who cares more about Trump's safety than I do outside of his immediate family. I mean, I'm not going to tell you that I think Melania and Don Jr. and Eric and the rest and I would care at the same level, them as a family member, me as a patriot, and a person that defends the Constitution and the Bill of Rights and believes in law and order, and especially the sanctity of human life. I don't care where I would fit on the political spectrum. I would never, in my wildest imagination, allow myself to even think about the possibility of justifying the assassination of a political figure or any other figure, any human body, any human being, unless they were a threat to my wife or my family. Self-defense is the only time that I think that taking a fellow human life is justified. So I'm not in any way allowing Vem Miller to get off the hook. But the title of this show is The Truth. And I believe that the truth should be our lowest common denominator. It should be the standard by which we judge. So my evaluation of Sheriff Bianco, I think, was shared by many members of the people of the press that were in that press conference where you heard the clip from Sheriff Bianco's statement at the top of this segment. If Mike Waltz stole valor, I think Shad Bianco stole the claim that his department intervened in an attempted assassination. Even the FBI, for whom I have low regard right now, I do believe that they are corrupt. I don't believe very much of anything they tell us. But even the FBI said that they did not view this as an attempted assassination. He was guilty of some sketchy stuff, a messy car, and 2 guns in his car with no evidence that he had the intent of doing harm to President Trump. I think it warrants a close examination. I think most telling is that he is now free on bond. They let him out of jail. And that's the truth. I'm John Gordon.